to update that intro. It's finished playing, Marrow. It's finished playing. Hello, everybody. We have come back, going throwback to old school bridge a little bit, doing some politics because, as Marrow will explain in just a moment, it's kind of important for folks around the world to kind of understand what's going on in U.S. politics, more or less because it affects everybody, whether we like it or not. And because the stuff that's going on with a former sitting president, the sheer number of charges that are being leveled against him from both federal and state level stuff, it's kind of important to understand both what's going on with him and what these charges are all about, because you're going to be hearing a lot about them over the next year or two, because it's going to take a while. And he's also kind of the front runner for the Republicans right now, so it's kind of we need to make sure that we're all on the same page. So, Marrow, go ahead and explain why, even if you're not from the States, you should probably care about this.
Because there's a very famous saying, which is, if the US sneezes, the whole world gets a cold. So, perfect example, our last federal election, someone called Clive Palmer, who is an absolute dweeb and should pay his debts to his employees rather than spending millions of dollars on a failed election bid, tried to go become our prime minister, and spent millions of dollars, and his thing was make Australia great. So he uses a lot of the popularism that Trump does. There are a lot of people in Australia that are Trump supporters for some unknown reason. And there's a lot of Australians like myself who are anti-Trump, but so there's actual literal Australians going Trump 2024. And so,
well, I mean, let's face it, American politics are a clown car. Advertisement starts a year before there's even ballots being printed, let alone considered.
But even saying that, just people are so interested in American politics that it overshadows Australian politics, and we've got some really interesting things that happen over here. Our politics are probably just as interesting as American ones. For example, our former prime minister, just without any oversight, decided to give himself an extra 4 portfolios during COVID. So he kind of did a fascism, which is great. This is what you want. So that's a thing. But when it comes to American politics,
let's face it, most Americans don't even fully understand American politics.
That's true. But also, if you just think about it, what happened in Florida with the huge heat waves, a lot of that could have been avoided if 500 people in Florida didn't vote for George W. Bush. So it's the most powerful country in the world. And when I was a little girl, and I understand now why this thought I had was completely not ever going to happen, completely wrong. But at the same time, I still understand my logic behind that, which is, I think every single person on the planet should have a say in America, should have a vote in American politics, because America turns around and it's we're the police, we're the international bullies, basically, is from my opinion.
By the way, anything you hear on this is going to be our opinions.
Yeah, it's all my opinion. I don't stand for any other thing, but I do think countries outside of America should have some sort of say in American politics, because what's happening in America influences my country very heavily, hugely.
Well, I mean, just think about economically, right? California is it is the 6th biggest economy in the world or something like that. It outclasses, as just a single state, it outclasses something like half of Europe in terms of just sheer economic output, which is kind of insane to think about. Our neighbors to the south.
Mm,
By the way,
exactly.
Ikeda decided to throw up a quote that I agree with. $20 super chat right off the bat. Thank you so much, Ikeda. Elon Musk has done more than Thomas Edison to discredit Tesla. Completely off topic, but it is a quote I agree with.
Uh,
Also, if you're a history nerd, it's hilarious. So, do you want to get on with the indictments? So we're big disclaimer, big
mm,
disclaimer. Neither of us are legal experts. We are average Joes that are looking into this and reading news articles and reading the indictments themselves and looking up definitions and things and trying to piece together as best we can what we can understand individually. We're not lawyers. None of this is legal advice. These are our
no,
opinions.
I don't
If we
even
get
know how.
something wrong, like we did our best to research stuff and we're going to be letting you guys know, like I'll be posting links in the chat to any articles and stuff that we're referencing so you'll know where we're getting our info from. But neither of us are lawyers. Marrow has a BS, so like she's great to talk about science, particularly microbiology.
And I'm
And
full of
I'm
BS too.
yeah, and I'm an author, so my entire job is BSing. But like because of this, just don't take anything we're saying as legal advice and just know that we're going to be touching on the bare bones of things, but we're trying to get it to where folks have at least a bare bones understanding of some of these things. And if we get
Mhm.
facts wrong, feel free to correct us with citations in the chat because we don't want to spread misinformation by accident.
Yeah. And this is actually more for my benefit because I'm just sitting there just going, "What the is going on over there?" Like
Zernak,
seriously.
no, that is absolutely wrong. In fact, lack of citizenship and not extending citizenship has been one of the number one ways in which historically people were denied the right to vote. Originally, the US Constitution only guaranteed the right to vote to white male landowners.
Yeah. Anti-alias polygons, which is honestly, that is a very cool name. I like that a lot. Says it feels weird to say people who aren't citizens should have a say in US politics, but we have such an outsized impact. I have had multiple people in the past tell me, "You're Australian, you don't have a right to say what we should do with our politics." And I'm just sitting here just going, the world's on fire because of you guys. Well, not because of you guys, but like, um, it like
This is definitely
the
the
rise
people
of
who run the
fascism.
companies here are definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, the rise of fascism can very be strongly linked to Trump being brought into America, being voted in. Like rise of fascism worldwide can be because it all started after Trump was voted in. Because other politicians on other parts of the world who are fascists saw that America and voted it in, and then they went, "We'll try this too." So,
Well, I mean, and
um,
plus he very much laid out quite the roadmap for how to get dangerous populist ideas and especially how to blame immigrants and such,
mm,
particularly for all of your problems. Like he very much took the pages out of the fascist playbook. And what's ridiculous is that he's very much like this billionaire who somehow all of these like average Joes who are some of them are living in just abject poverty think that he relates to them even though he's
yeah,
like the most out of touch person on earth. But this is not trying to trash on Trump. We were going to talk about legal stuff, so we need to be careful going too far that way because the focus is okay, so what's he accused of and what does it mean? And like who's doing
yeah,
the accusing and where? We got
yeah.
another Akeda super chat, $5 from Akeda. One world left wing government now. At the very least, the left wing part. I'm not sure if the one world. I'm not sure if there's one large group of people who can figure out what everybody in the world needs. Like, I'm not sure anybody's got that level of responsibility. I think more localized government might be more important there, but we can talk about that political theory later. All right. So
Yes.
first indictment. We're gonna go chronologically. I'm referencing the U.S. News and World Report not because I think it's a really amazing news outlet, but because they do have the pages of the indictments. You can look at them directly, and they also have really good summaries for their articles. So I'm starting off with this to kind of help build our timeline. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in the chat. So the first indictment is the hush money, which happened in March 30th. So allegedly, and we're going to be using that word a lot, even though we've got lots and lots of evidence that this happened. Allegedly,
Yeah,
Trump
allegedly.
and his
Well,
lawyer, Michael Cohen, uh, falsified a ton of business records and basically pretending that they were paying out consulting fees and other things for non-existent legal cases in order to cover up trying to pay off a very famous porn star, Stormy
Mhm.
Daniels, for an illicit affair.
Mm. Can I
Which
just
is kind of
quickly
hilarious given the grab him by the you know what quotes that he
Mhm.
was doing, like, oh, he's trying to rehabilitate his image. From what though?
Yeah. Before we go on, I just want to say a quick hello to Lynn of Darkness. It's a person from my Discord, very special person for me.
Hello.
So just hello, Lynn.
So he was charged with 34 felony counts of falsifying business records for what prosecutors say was the illegal concealment of payments made as part of an elaborate catch and kill hush money scheme. So basically, he was trying to get Stormy Daniels to sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for large payments that he then covered up in his tax records
Yeah.
and tried to write off his taxes as legal expenses, which, to be honest, was the most. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the mob, right? During the Prohibition, U.S. history time for about a minute, because we're going to come back to the mob in a bit because he's getting charged on mob statutes later on down the line. But the mob, big mob bosses back during the Prohibition era, most of the time they didn't get caught on like racketeering. They got caught on tax fraud. Like the IRS is one of the most terrifying organizations in the American government. They can find out damn near anything about you.
And it needs
Like,
to be funded more because the more you put money into the IRS, the more likely they are to be able to go after the big wigs. And going after the big wigs means that the smaller wigs don't get audited as much, and the big wigs have to start paying more money.
yes, Hodor, the reason we have to say allegedly is because you could be sued for defamation for calling them a criminal. Yes, even though there's ample evidence, and it is very much my opinion that this is very likely to have occurred because there's ridiculous amounts of evidence that's very publicly available, including
Mm.
recordings of conversations and things. Allegedly, he did these things. And part of the reason for that is because there isn't a criminal conviction yet. And so, because a jury or judge has not said, this happened, it's still alleged. He's still going through trial. They're still trying to prove to a group of his peers, even though they wouldn't be his peers, they'd probably be people of much lower class than he is. A jury of people who would be his peers if he gave a damn about anybody else, that he actually did that.
Yep. So you could say I'm allegedly Australian until I've been to court and be charged for the crime of being Australian. So
Lynn
allegedly,
is correct there. Everything is alleged until a guilty or innocent decision is reached by a judge or jury, specifically, or a jury, because remember here, most things are done by jury. Though we will talk a little bit about what a grand jury is in just a moment. So this one's actually the most simple out of all of them, even though there's a whole bunch of felony counts of falsifying business records and things because they counted a whole bunch of the individual records that way. Basically, that first one in from March is probably the simplest out of all of these to explain. He allegedly falsified a bunch of business records so he could pay off a porn star that he allegedly had an affair with that allegedly could potentially blackmail him for that. I don't know whether she took the
allegedly.
money or not, but I doubt she did because he was trying to get her to sign an NDA, and NDAs are pretty legally binding. So the fact that this story came out at all means she probably didn't.
To which, good on her. I mean,
I mean,
like,
if she did take that money, which I mean, it came out of the accounts and stuff, and they falsified the records. So maybe if she did take that money, she still broke the NDA. I mean, it was still illegal because it was hush money scheme.
yeah. So what happens if you take the money and just say that just break the NDA anyway, because it was money that was illegally given to you? Does it still stand in court? Can you still be sued?
I don't actually know. That would be a question for a lawyer. That's maybe somebody could find that.
Yeah.
So indictment number 2 is where we start to get into things that might need a little bit of explanation. Marrow, do you know what a grand jury is?
It's a jury that is really high quality, high class, really big, probably
It's
all
a
walk
jury of
around.
lawyers.
Yeah, walk around with like top hats on, with a cane, like in the like the early 1900 suits with
A
the
dapper jury.
yeah, dapper. Yeah, that's a grand jury. Is that right?
No. Okay. So the second one, we're looking at a
That's
grand jury
disappointing.
indictment. And so what differs an indictment from when you just say like charges were brought is that a grand jury has to be convened, that a prosecutor has to convince that there is enough evidence to establish probable cause in order to actually bring charges against somebody. Now, usually grand juries are convened for the big felonies. So think we'll be talking about RICO cases and we'll talk about what those are in a little bit, but like mob cases, racketeering, that kind of stuff. It's sedition, which that's a thing, and also things like breaking the law surrounding classified documents, things that could put national security at risk, the big crimes. So typically federal or state prosecutors, if they want to charge somebody of some of these higher class crimes, these higher tier felonies, there's a higher burden of proof and they have to convince a jury. Now, a grand jury is actually like a normal jury, TM, but they're not convicting someone of a crime. They're deciding whether or not a prosecutor can even bring charges against the person for another jury to figure that out. So,
Oh,
like, basically, you have to impress two juries if you're dealing with an indictment, because you have to impress the first one enough with the prosecutor to see if it's worth bringing charges. And then the second one is the actual jury that's going to be involved with the crime itself, like seeing the
okay.
actual evidence and figuring that out. So, when you're talking
Yeah.
about an indictment, typically
Can
you're
you
talking about a grand
quickly
jury.
can you quickly define an indictment?
Define an indictment.
Quickly, if that's possible.
It's a document that lays out the charges that a criminal is being charged with that a grand jury determined were worth prosecuting.
Yeah. So
So
this
it's a
is
long legal document.
this stream is more just so I can be educated on what's going on. So I'm going to be asking all the stupid ass questions because I am Australian and I have no idea what's going on. So this is primarily for me. This is just Ali's just educating me, and we just thought we'd talk about how just in case
How screwed American
anybody else
politics
has
are.
questions. Yeah. So because this is all complicated shit. so please excuse if I ask questions and everyone's like, this is a bit stupid. You're right, because I have no idea what's going on.
Florence Legal Eagle actually did some excellent videos on each of these as they came out, but we're trying to kind of summarize a little bit because the most recent one is the most interesting to me, at least. And again, this
Yeah.
is a throwback episode. We haven't done politics on the bridge in a hot minute, and it's kind of like allyship stuff between pagans and atheists is what we built this channel for. Like the channel originally was actually founded on the idea of the bridge, and then I started doing pagan stuff as well. But like when I originally wanted to start my channel, I wanted to start with like a live stream doing this sort of allyship work. It's what I came from before I started doing all of my just straight pagan, here's how to Hellenist stuff.
Mm. So,
Yeah, you can get a trans jury to indict a ham sandwich. The prosecutor doesn't have to present exculpatory evidence, and there's no defense generally. Yeah, I mean the prosecutor just has to present enough evidence to convince the grand jury. So coming back to the charges, indictment number 2. So this is a federal indictment, if I recall correctly. So the first one was New York. The second one is federal. And this happened on June 9th, and it has to do with him allegedly, except we have so much evidence that I don't even have to say that he held on to a whole bunch of classified documents, allegedly. It is my opinion that he did this willfully, given the recordings that we have of employees at Mar-a-Lago and other places talking about, oh, the boss said to move them again, and they were just stored out in the open, and he bragged about having them, and like, yeah, it is my opinion that he did this very knowingly, because we have recordings of him and his own voice saying more or less that.
yeah, it's pretty obvious that he is, in my opinion, with obviously my opinion, very guilty. And one of the things that I found really interesting, and I do want to talk about this later if we've got enough time, is the Olympic levels of mental gymnastics people are doing to talk about how Trump is innocent. Oh, you just didn't know. Rah, rah, rah. Guys, there's how many boxes were there that were in Mar-a-Lago? Like, genuinely, how many boxes did they find, and how many were missing? Like, so
Well,
I'm
and how
more
severe the
interested.
classification on some of them were, because, like,
Yeah,
some of the classified materials that they, like, recovered were so classified that even their classifications were redacted.
Jesus. Yeah, that's and it's sort of like, and yeah, so for me, I find the propaganda and the cult psychology behind it the most fascinating. Sort of that's the stuff I really like to get my teeth into. And so yeah, so my opinion and my thoughts are more along those sorts of things of the the what's in the gymnastics, the mental gymnastics, and how people trying to make him out to be innocent when it's very clearly, in my opinion, he is not.
So, that's a quick timeline on this. In April of 2022, the FBI convened a federal grand jury and issued a subpoena um, on May 11th to Trump to get all of the classified documents in his possession or control back, because they realized there were a whole bunch missing. And keep in mind, Trump at this point allegedly had showed these documents to multiple other people, despite their classifications, and bragged about it. There are recordings of him talking about it. There are also allegedly, as Steve the Wizard pointed out, recordings of him talking about how he could have declassified them when he was president, but he didn't, and now he can't. So, what ended up
Yeah.
happening was that he supposedly, allegedly, suggested to one of his lawyers that they lie to the FBI about the documents that he had. Oh,
Isn't
we've
that a
already given them
crime?
back. We don't have anything. Yes. Yes, it is.
Mm, thought I'd just double check on that one.
Yeah. So, um, at that point, his lawyer supposedly went to Mar-a-Lago to go look. Before the lawyer got there, according to the indictment, Trump told Nauta to move some of the boxes from a storage area to his, to the place that he lived at Mar-a-Lago.
What's Nauta?
Nauta is one of the folks. I believe he's one of the lawyers. He might be one of the legal team, or he's one of the folks that was involved in this. Let me remember, because there's so many. There's such a cavalcade of names. Let me look up who Nauta is.
I am absolutely
Oh, the
looking.
valet, Walt Nauta. So he's the
Oh, okay.
valet. He was the valet that was there at the time.
Yeah,
So
I
he
am very
instructed
much
his
looking.
valet to move them, from where they were to his residence, in order to try to conceal them from the
Yeah,
lawyer and from potentially the FBI if they were to come in.
yeah. I'm looking forward to the dramatical series of of this in 5 years' time.
It'd be a hell of a movie, wouldn't it?
It would be one like, we're talking, like, this would be,
To be
like,
honest, this is the sort of movie, or novel, that if you were to write it, people would be like, it's too unrealistic.
yeah, like, this
Why
this
would
is sort of
anybody let him get away with all of this?
yeah, this makes, Watergate look, you know, eh, what is what is
It
like,
was also
Watergate's
brazen,
nothing. Yeah, so
allegedly.
I'd love to see a very like, this would be a very if someone could very accurately and, like, without, doing a real would make 'em do a really good and very accurate job, this would make a fantastic movie or, series, I think this would be a TV series because you'd have to get to, like, an hour, like Game of Thrones level of detail kinda thing, ignoring the last 2 seasons, but the you know what I'm talking about, like,
Mhm.
this needs to be a series of hour-long episodes that written
Just a
by people.
dramatic reenactment of the
Yeah,
ridiculousness of it.
because I would watch that because it's sort of like living through it, you're kinda getting what's going on, but having somebody do this would be awesome.
This is like the tutorial level for an Ace Attorney knockoff. As a fan of that series, I agree with you. All right. So, allegedly, prosecutors in the document say that Nauta moved 64 boxes and then moved 30 boxes back for the lawyer to go through. So, 64 boxes of stuff, TM.
Can I just double check something? That's 30. Well, you said 30 boxes or less. That's less than 60, isn't it?
Okay, so they took 60 boxes and moved him to his residence, and then he took 30 boxes back to where they were before for the lawyer to look through.
Right. So that's less than 60. He didn't take them all. Just double checking. I'm not great with maths. I'm making a joke here.
Yeah, last I do believe that 30 is in fact less than 60.
Yes.
It's been a while. It's been over 10 years since I was in school, but
yeah, hang on. I think I've got I've got a calculator here. Here, hang on. I'll just try and figure that one out.
I hope you all can hear the sarcasm.
Yeah, no, it's less than 60.
Somebody's going to clip us out of context and be like, Allie doesn't know how to do basic math.
I mean, if you ask me,
how do you get a degree if you don't either?
Well, the thing is, I'm pretty sure
I guess maybe that's why it's a BS degree.
So it's probably not an unnecessarily wrong assumption to make.
All right. So, after that, the lawyer submitted a false certification to the FBI and the grand jury that stated that they had done a diligent search. Now, it's not very clear whether the lawyer knew about the other 34 boxes or not. It's obvious that Trump told his lawyer, allegedly, to lie about that, and apparently there's evidence showing that if it's in the indictment, because remember, with indictments and like charges and stuff, they have to have at least some kind of evidence in order to try to bring that forward. Prosecutors typically don't waste their time on stuff they have nothing, especially in some that's this high profile. Like they're going to have all of their I's dotted and their T's crossed if they're taking this out, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's not clear whether the lawyer knew about the other 34 boxes or not, or if Trump had lied about that too.
Probably.
But definitively, they submitted a false certification saying they'd conducted a diligent search and we don't have them, guys. Hands are up, not us.
However, Ikeda, I'm sorry. Just,
Ikeda, $5 super cat. Go ahead and read that since you caught it.
Trump isn't great at math either. So it's true.
Apparently, we've got a conspiracy theories here. Steve says this is why the Republicans want to cut school funding, making sure people don't figure out 60 is more than 30. I mean, that would be an advantage.
All
right. So after this, FBI obtained a surveillance video showing Nauta moving the boxes, which then gave them grounds to apply for a search warrant, which, for those of you who don't know, cops can't look through your house. No cops, whether they're the big federal cops or the local street cops, can't look through your house or your possessions without a warrant unless you consent. So if a cop wants to look through your car, for example, he needs, ask him for a warrant.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Not officially legal advice, but it's helpful to know your rights.
So does that mean that Nauta committed a crime as well? Did he know what was in those boxes?
I don't actually know. I'm not sure if the indictment actually details that. I did read through it, but it's a lot of legalese. But there is a chance he did, given he is Trump's valet and he was asked to move all those things. And why would the boss want all that stuff moved? I mean, Trump was bragging about it so much. We have that on recordings that I can say he bragged about having those documents because he did. We have recordings of his voice saying this. So it's very strongly possible that Nauta knew what was in those boxes.
Yeah. Ikeda says, in fairness, A&W's third pound hamburger didn't sell because too many people thought it was smaller than a 1/4 pounder.
This is why we need at least a basic high school education. So, because of that, they ended up getting the warrant and executed the search warrant, which, of course, anybody who remembers the news at the time, Trump very much played up in the news at the time, was like, oh, I'm being persecuted. This is a psyop by the Biden administration to try to keep me from running in 2024. He's a bitter loser because he thought because he was still lying and saying he won the election at the time. So, like, the Biden administration needs to put me away, blah, blah, blah. So he was going off on all that. But they found 102 documents with classified markings in Trump's office and in his, like, living space at Mar-a-Lago.
And the toilet.
So,
And to be
and in the
honest, I don't know what
bathroom. But I
yeah,
mean,
I
that's
don't know
part
what
of
the
the
bigger
living
crime
space, one would
was.
assume. Like, toilet is part of living space.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, well, I don't know what the bigger crime is keeping the classified toilets in the classified
Classified toilets. That's
documents
a
in the
new
toilets,
Marrowism.
or classified toilets, um, classified documents in the toilets, or the the sh- the design of that toilet. Did you see it? It was hideous. It was just like, oh my god, what? It's a crime against fashion and interior design, and that's coming from me. And you don't want me designing the interior of your house at all. Like, that's the worst decision you could make. Like, and even I think it was ugly. So,
So, on top of the indictment, one of the other sets of charges is that he showed classified material to others. Allegedly, in July 2021, Trump told a writer, a publisher, and 2 aides about classified materials related to national defense. They were reported at the time to be related to Pentagon documents about attacking Iran.
mm,
And prosecutors got a recording of that meeting, which was transcribed in the indictment. He said that it was classified and then proceeded to just show it to people who were definitively not given clearance to see it.
yeah, didn't he do that? Like, start talking about real high, top secret things at dinner in front of the Japanese Prime Minister at Mar-a-Lago. Like, this was
I
during
believe
his.
so. And there was also
Yeah.
another thing that he leaked on Twitter, which was like that photo from the satellite that was like way more advanced than what anybody else publicly has available, and it was tech from like the 90s.
Right. So it's tech. Well,
But that was
tech.
while he was in office though, whereas this is he's no longer in office and he illegally has these.
Yeah. So we can be fairly confident in saying that he is not a person that you want to tell your deepest, darkest secrets to.
So because there's a recording, my opinion is that this definitively happened. That's my opinion. My opinion is not legal fact. It hasn't been determined in the court of law yet, but I mean, there's a recording of it. I'm pretty sure it's not a deep fake.
Yeah. And I would agree with that, in my opinion.
So in a separate incident in either August or September of 2021, the indictment also says that Trump showed a member of his super PAC a classified map of a foreign country and told that person he shouldn't be showing it to them and told them not to get too close.
Right. Yes.
So, yeah, it is my opinion that he probably knew he was committing a crime while doing that, given what he said.
Yeah. And this goes back way, way back because I don't know I can't remember, but Alexander Downer, who was an Australian politician, was basically overheard him talking about classified documents, like classified information, and Downer just went, "I'm going to have to tell somebody this." So Australia, you got to thank Australia. One of us helped bring down Trump, so.
Yeah, it's seeing him. I shouldn't be showing this to you. Proceeds to show anyway. Don't get too close, though. Even though you're looking at it, I shouldn't be showing it to you.
I shouldn't.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. One of my loud neighbors is driving by. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Trump
I
does
can't.
think he's above the law. When you have that much money and you could just like pay anybody off that goes after you,
It's kind of true.
so
It's actually
that's most of the counts dealing with the classified documents. Basically, there are a number of counts related to having them, and there are a number of counts related to showing them off.
Yeah.
And he
Yes.
was indicted on June 9th. So that's the second one. We are a quarter of the way into this video, or like third of the way into the video. However, we are now on indictment 3, and this one requires a little bit of explanation because it has to do with some stuff that the Old Bridge actually covered about January 6th. Anybody who lives in the US, and even probably most folks who don't, probably have an idea of what happened on January 6th, right? Like Trump delivers this big rallying speech, and a whole bunch of his supporters stormed the Capitol, most of which were armed,
Mhm.
many of which were armed, rioting and looting and pillaging. He heavily suggested that Mike Pence, who he had allegedly instructed to refuse to certify the votes, or allegedly had instructed to certify alternate slates of votes, which that's part of what's going to come up in this indictment. That he had stated that, you know, he sealed his fate and things of that nature when this riot happened. Multiple senators and House representatives potentially had their lives threatened by these crowds. There
Mm.
were multiple militias that were present, yeah, might as well be.
Yeah.
He openly extended, like he called shortly before this, he called out to the Proud Boys and was like, "Hey, you know, stand ups and stand by." He knew
I
what was happening. It is my
I will
opinion.
I was listening to a podcast from Skeptics with a K, similar, run by the same people, called Skeptics in the Pub, and they had a person on who was a expert in the Proud Boys, and she mentioned that stand back and stand by is a white nationalist prison dog whistle. That was from a prison
Oh, I didn't know
gang.
that.
Yeah, it's a prison gang, white nationalist prison gang dog whistle.
Yeah, the Proud Boys were not
Yep.
standing by that day. In fact,
No,
they
but
were among
that
those who had wreaked some of the worst violence in the Capitol riots.
yeah, it's sort of to me, like, when I told people that, they're like, "Oh, yeah, whatever," and I'm like, "The the president said to a hate group, a white nationalist prison gang dog whistle, and you don't find that concerning at all? Like, what's going on?
And
Why
that's
don't
not
we?"
allegedly, that happened on national television.
Yeah, that had like, yeah, like, yeah, so it's sort of like, I just wanted to let everyone know that that saying is a prison gang dog whistle, um, said by the US president to a hate group, to a violent right-wing hate group. So,
Well, yeah, there was the QAnon guy. There was also the guy who had all of those like Norse looking tattoos that like caused major problems for the pagan community. And that ended up getting
mhm,
covered and discussed extensively. Like, hey, you know, is this guy actually a pagan? Or is
no,
he, you know, are these just hate group symbols and that sort of thing? So, like,
yeah,
there was an entire big thing. Like, there was a kerfuffle even within the pagan community about
yeah,
this. And
and
actually, there's a restaurant that is in my area. The owner's son got convicted in the January 6th
oh,
riots. So
wow.
a little bit like it's a seafood restaurant, so not a place that I go, but it was a place I used to go before my allergy got so bad I couldn't eat meat anymore.
Mm, yeah,
And that
it's
was
sort
kind of
of
depressing.
it is very sad, and, yeah, like
Ikeda says $5 super chat. Let's hope he has a chance to use that dog whistle in the appropriate venue. I mean, is it a
yeah,
dog whistle anymore if you are in prison?
oh, maybe, I don't know, but, yeah, it's sort of, I also listened to a podcast called, QAnon Casualties, that, um, Courtney Heard, um, publishes, and if you're interested in QAnon and those sorts of things, I really suggest you read about it, because she interviews people have, who have family members who went down the QAnon rabbit hole, and a lot of them talk about how their family members went to January 6th. And there's some really just some horrible stories about it, and they're all a lot of them point to Trump and Trump's behavior as to why they lost their family members. So when I was saying earlier, I find the psychology and the cult mentality very interesting around this, and this is what I'm talking about. The and Yeah, and it's sort of one of the things that I remember. The first thing I thought when I heard about January 6th, because I woke up obviously, and all of a sudden, like, Twitter was in a flame with, yes, these people tried overrunning the Capitol building, and I just went, "Oh my god, is AOC okay?" Because I know that if she had been caught by these people, she would not have had a quick nor pleasant death. So thank God she was okay. That she was the first person I was so scared for her because of the constant hate being put on her by the Murdoch media and Fox News and stuff like that. Like, she's a tough woman to go through what she's going through. So yeah, that's my take, was when I found out. And it was sort of also a kind of thing like, anyone with half a brain, as the day that Trump got elected, we knew something like this was going to happen. It was one of those, like, we knew
I
that
mean, he was weaving conspiracy theories, and it wasn't even the election season yet. Like, he was still harping about Hillary, like, for the first 2 years of his campaign, and then he started harping about a conspiracy against him.
Yeah, but even before he got elected, we knew there was going to be something like this happen.
I mean, he's been dog whistling to the far right the entirety of his presidency. They're his base.
Yeah, it's horrifying. It was absolutely like, as soon as he got in, I just went, we're about to see another war. Somehow you avoided that.
Well, I mean, they tried, not for the want of them trying.
Yeah,
so which is what we're actually talking about, because this is the 2020 election obstruction. Because he did a number of things here, allegedly, that he is getting charged for. But this one has a bit of explanation behind it for folks who aren't familiar with American politics. Do you know what the Electoral College is?
Yeah, yes. No.
Do you want to try to give a summary of what you think the Electoral College is? And then I'll explain how it works and give you a grade.
Okay, it's gonna be like a D minus. Okay, so it's got something to do with senators, and there's a number of senators in the state, and then there's like, they give you votes, like give those senators votes, and then and you add all of those votes up within the states, and then you give that, and whoever has the most amount of votes wins, kind of.
Okay,
Like, I know
so
Florida has a lot of.
it's nothing to do with the senators. The people that go to the Electoral College are called electors, and they're separate.
Oh.
In fact, you might actually not even know who their names are unless you go digging for them. They're called electors, and they're called delegates. So electors, so that I'm going to give you a D, because you kind of understood the broad basics of, okay, well, your vote is not your vote. You're not voting directly for the president in the United States. You're voting for. Okay, so here's what the Electoral College is. In the United States, the smaller states, the more rural states, were worried that they would just get outvoted by the more populous, city-heavy coastal states. So there was a balance that was struck, in part because the Founding Fathers were also worried that the unwashed masses, as it were, us, were not educated well enough to make decisions on who should rule us. And so there should be people who can put checks and balances in, to stop somebody like, say, I don't know, just spitballing out there, maybe like a populist fascist, like, yellow hair guy from getting elected in the future, that there should be a stopgap for that. They never really theorized that the two-party balance would be so bad that that check and balance wouldn't work. But basically, when you cast a vote in the United States, you are not voting for the president in a presidential election. You are actually voting for what is known as a slate of electors. Now, the vast majority of states ascribe to the popular vote. Like, basically, either the popular vote determines it, or there's a number of electoral districts, and whoever wins the majority of those electoral districts gets the full slate of that state's electors. So when you look at the election maps, right, during the election clown car that is the US elections, when you see all those maps and it's like, oh, well, this number you get if you get this state. That's how many elector votes you get if you get the majority of the districts in the state.
Okay.
So in the United States, you can win the popular vote and lose the election. In fact, it's happened a lot in the past 20 years.
Yeah, wasn't like the last 5 Republican presidents lost the popular vote? Because I know George W. Bush did.
Yep, and
Um,
Hillary did as well. She won the popular vote, and Trump still won the election.
yeah, which makes no fucking sense. Like,
Well, I mean, if you understand how the Electoral College works, it makes sense. But what that means is based off of the number of Electoral College votes you have, that determines the voting power of an individual citizen in a state. Because basically, if you divide the number of electors by the population, you get the percentage of that vote that each individual vote represents, which
yeah,
means that somebody in, say, Wyoming, their vote's worth way more than mine.
yeah. And I think, like,
And that's
on
where you
paper,
get the idea of the swing states from, because you
yeah,
have to win the states where if you can sway, say, 500 people or 1,000 people, it's a lot
mm,
easier than having to sway an entire blue state, for example, if you're red.
yeah,
Like if you can sway 500 people in one of those swing states, you can get the entire state's slate of electors.
yeah. And that's what I was saying with Al Gore. Um, 500 people, um, like 500 people should that was if he had won Florida, he would have won the American election, and it was 500 people who went for George W. Bush. Um, yeah, so I remember that and thinking to myself, what a wasted opportunity. And now Florida just went through one of the hottest year on record. That could not have actually physically have happened if it wasn't for climate change. The temperatures Florida went through was so high that they went, no, this actually, if climate change wasn't happening, this temperature could not have would not have actually physically been able to happen. So, and yeah, so those 500 people, well, five those hung tickets and whatever they were called. Yeah, and
Well, I
that's
mean, you
just
can also
drives me
blame the
wild.
governor for forcing those recounts and everything because,
Yeah,
allegedly. Coming
allegedly,
back
but
to it though, according to Steve, and this is correct to my knowledge, almost every time the Electoral College has a vote contrary to the popular vote, it was in favor of Republicans due to gerrymandering, which is true. Gerrymandering is a
yeah,
major problem. And
yeah.
since they've got control of the Supreme Court right now, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, which is bullshit. And yeah, because we talked a little bit about how I wanted to talk about the way elections happen in Australia. We won't talk about it now, but I want to give a couple of my thoughts on the way I believe a good democracy works from coming from an Australian perspective. So
So, like, there's a reason why I went into all that preamble about the Electoral College because one of the counts that he has was, I believe it was conspiracy to falsify documents in an official proceeding. I'd have to actually look at the name of the indictment of the section of that indictment.
I just want to
But
jump in. Florence B makes a very perfect. I like that. US politics. What fun is there in making sense? Sorry, continue on.
so there was conspiracy to fraud the United States, which had to do with the Electoral College because one of the things that he tried to do was that in several states, lawyers under him and potentially him allegedly conspired together to get false slates of electors put up for certain states and to have those electors certified as official despite the fact that those electors were not certified by the state processes as the official electors. He made calls allegedly to multiple state officials stating that the Justice Department had certified them, etc., in order to attempt to certify that state's electoral college votes as being for himself.
Yeah, that's illegal. Very illegal. Um, yeah, that's silly, very silly. And I think he should not have done that. That's my take. Allegedly, I think he allegedly shouldn't have done that. Allegedly.
What's interesting, though, by the way, is that the indictment includes a number of lies that Trump told, and it really
What?
stresses that he told them knowingly.
Trump told a lie? Oh, never.
So this 35, this third indictment is 45 pages long, by the way, if you want to go attempt to read it.
Can you read it to me?
It would take way longer than we have left on the stream to read the entire document out loud.
I mean, just read it to me while I'm trying to fall asleep.
So the indictment is pretty explicit. Like, despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power.
Mm.
So it talks about him spreading lies. And it acknowledges that he's legally allowed to speak publicly about the election and to lie, but it also then talks about pursuing, quote, unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes. And so this is where we start to get into some of the conspiracies.
Yeah.
So interestingly, the indictment does talk about there being 6 co-conspirators, but he's the only defendant. So we don't know if those other co-conspirators are now witnesses against him or if they're getting charged in the future.
Or both. I suppose both could probably happen. Is that possible? To have both? Like, to be both charged and a witness?
Usually if you're a witness in these sorts of things, you've probably taken a plea deal of some kind. So you might still get charged, but your plea deal might give you either a reduced sentence or it might absolve you entirely because you're being a witness to the state. Really depends on what the prosecutor thinks they can get out of you and like how valuable your testimony is to the case based off of what evidence they have.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of the source of the prisoner's dilemma. It's the, the 2 guys that were both involved in the crime, right? And like, if one of them tattles on the other, they go scot-free and the other one goes to jail forever. If they both tattle, they'll both get sort of like a 5-year sentence. And if neither of them tattles, they'll both go scot-free. But the problem is you don't know if the other guy's going to tattle on you. So it's in your best interest to try to cut a deal.
Yeah,
So that's kind of where that idea comes from, is the idea of this sort of like cutting a plea deal to get a reduced sentence when you've been involved in something like this.
Yeah, I think if you've done the crime, do the time kind of thing. I mean, one of the things that really kind of makes me angry is that there are people in the US prison population that have had an ounce of weed on them that were sent to prison for worse, like for longer time than for what Trump could end up getting. Like, that's my thing. There's obviously 2 justice systems, one for rich white people and one for poor black people.
Sing them. The police can say whatever they damn well please, except for promising you to like be convicted or not.
Yeah, the police can lie.
Can't promise that they can't promise that they'll do anything specific for you. But apart from that, they can imply that they'll help you. They can lie about evidence they have against you. They can lie about what other people have said about you. They can say whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, which is really fucked up. Like, legitimately.
They can't threaten you with violence, or they might get their case tossed out.
Yeah, but that never changes anything, really, does it?
But yes, anti-Alice polygons. Yes, that is in fact another stream. But coming back to, so we have the frauds, the like fraudulent elector scheme. We also have counts regarding attempting to persuade officials in multiple states, which I think I have a list of them somewhere. Let me see if I can find the document really quick. Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. To ignore the popular vote, dismiss legitimate electors, and disenfranchise millions of voters. So basically, those are the fraudulent elector schemes, or in Georgia, allegedly, and we'll get into the Georgia counts in a moment because he got charged in the state as well. So we're talking with another federal charge here for the sedition is one of the charges on this particular set. Conspiracy to defraud the United States. There's another one, if I recall correctly, that relates, let me try to find it really quick. It relates specifically to, let me see if I can find it again. Oh, conspiring to delete surveillance footage that authorities requested. So that was another 3 additional charges. So conspiracy to destroy evidence. Let me see if I can find the other thing that he had gotten charged with, because there's 4 major crimes that he had gotten charged with in this one.
And remember, all of this is allegedly, and this is
Yeah,
all our
these are all
opinion.
things he's been charged with. These are things
Yeah.
that he's not yet convicted of. These are things he's been charged with.
Yes, this is all allegedly. So just making sure you all understand this. And I'm just speaking to fill dead space. And while Ali is looking for things, so because you're not supposed to have dead space, dead air, because that's boring for people. And Ali can come in at any time that she wishes to.
Okay, one
But
count of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. So that was specifically for the riot. 1 count of obstruction and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, which is also the riot, and 1 count of conspiracy against rights. That's the other one. It's conspiracy against voting rights, specifically with the slates of fraudulent electors. The prosecution in this case is stating more. They are charging him with attempting to strip the voting rights of the citizens in those states by using those slates of fraudulent electors to elect himself despite the will of the people.
yeah, so pretty bad, all of them. And do you mind if I go and have a quick chat about one part of Australian politics that I really agree with, even though for a lot of Americans they'll be like, "What the hell? That's terrible."
Sure, go ahead.
So in Australia, voting is compulsory. It is if you put your name down to say that you want to vote, and you do that once, you cannot not vote for the rest of your life unless there is a medical reason why you can't do it. For example, you're 105 years old and you can't move, or if you have significant impairment like dementia or a traumatic brain injury or something like that, or you physically cannot do it, or if you have a religious reason to. So if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you can say, look, I don't want to vote anymore. But other than that, with those exceptions, even if you're overseas on the other side of the planet, you will, and you don't vote, they will give you a fine, which I don't know what it is. I think it's something like $50 or $100 or maybe 150 or something like that. It's fairly nominal. Singham says, what is the US law on convicted people running? Is there a maximum jail term beyond which you can't run? Do parties need to justify the existence of convicted candidates in the ballots to the authorities?
There is
Don't know.
nothing that is stopping Trump from running, and he could technically be the president from jail if he gets elected.
That's not good.
However,
know that
the second set of indictments, the second federal set, and the Georgia set, which we haven't gotten to, the RICO set, he can't pardon himself of either of those. He could pardon himself potentially if he gets convicted or if while he's charged of the charges related to Stormy Daniels and the ones related to the classified documents, but he cannot pardon himself of the ones related to January 6th or the RICO charges in Georgia, which we will get to in a moment.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens with compulsory voting in Australia is that we always do it on a Saturday, and because you have to vote, the laws cannot be passed to stop people from voting. So things like gerrymandering or the removal of voting machines.
Okay, gerrymandering doesn't stop people from voting. It just makes
Well,
it
not
so that some of their votes don't count.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
removal of voting machines or trying to strip people's rights because, say, they only have a P.O. box and not an address, which was done to try to strip Indigenous people's rights of voting in the 2020 election, those sorts of things.
Yeah. There's a lot of so those things you can't do. You literally cannot do, because if you do that, if you pass those laws, then you're or make it very difficult to vote, you they'll come down on you like a ton of bricks because you're literally forcing people to break the law, which I think is entrapment or something like that. And so what that means is, for me as an Australian, you drive to your closest schools, because normally it's schools or community centres that will that service the area, to go vote. You go there, you have your democracy sausage, if you eat meat or could be bothered buying one. Usually it's um, for $5 or something like that, and it's a bit of an Australian custom, and it goes to like the school that's hosting it or whatever. You go in, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes. You can do it literally in your lunch break. You go vote, and then you walk out. The last time I went voting, there was a little stall there where you could buy some plants, and some cakes and things like that. It's a really good community thing, which I and so it's
Do you
super
want to
easy.
hear? Do you want to hear a story of making it even easier? Do you want to know how we vote
Mm,
here?
How?
Everybody gets an absentee ballot in Washington. It gets mailed to your address about a month before it's due, and everybody gets a voter's pamphlet that has statements from every candidate that is on the ballot, and every measure that is on the ballot, statements for and against, and the full text of the laws.
Yeah.
And the return envelope to send them in is prepaid.
Yeah.
There are also
So,
polling places you can go to, and there are boxes at the corner. If you don't want to mail it, there are boxes on many street corners where you can just drop them off too. But
mm,
like, it is the easiest. Everybody gets an absentee ballot automatically. You don't have to apply for them. You get an entire month to vote. I mean, it's the easiest that it could possibly be.
and what's the voting percentage in your area? Do you know?
Let me look it up really quick. I think
Because
we
in
have one of
Australia,
the higher ones in the state. Let's see.
yeah, because in Australia, it's something like 98% of people vote who are eligible.
Voter turnout is 63%. It was 63% for our last election, 11-8.
That's not great, but still, that's
Okay,
better than
it's shockingly high.
for a country that has a 98%
Okay, that's
voter
but
turnout.
that's a local election, mind you,
Mm,
which most
yeah,
people don't give a crap about. So like that's actually
yeah,
really high for
mm. Yeah, so but what that compulsory voting thing is like, I've had a couple of Americans go, "Oh, but, you're being forced by the government to do something." And it's like, it takes 5 minutes, and it's an important thing. And what's happening in Australia is that people, like, if we were to run on a populist, PM, they're not as likely to get through.
well,
Our,
because
like,
people are a lot more connected.
are a lot more connected. And so take, for example, uh, a non-compulsory vote that was passed a couple of years ago, which was to allow gay people to get married. It wasn't compulsory, and I think it was something, I can't remember. It was like 60% of people voted, or something like that. But if if it was compulsory to vote, then, it would have been a lot different, because, and I can't remember the exact. You're going to have to double check me on that one, because it was 71% of people voted yes to allow people who are gay to get married. So and as I said, this was like 2016, 17. It was pretty disgusting time, and it was horrible, because it was like, but what I'm trying to say is that if you didn't have to vote, people wouldn't. And then one part of the reason why the yes no vote was so low was because the no vote people were more likely to vote, because they were always being told they're not going to pass. So you've got people who were voting. More people who wanted no were more likely to vote than people who wanted yes. So yeah, so that's my experience with voting in Australia in regards to compulsory voting. Is if you allowed people to, if you made it compulsory to vote, one, you won't be seeing things like voter suppression laws being passed. things like giving it like 1 or 2 ballot places in that service 150,000 people, that sort of things. You don't see that sort of stuff, which is voter suppression that in Australia than what you would see in countries like America.
So what you're
Yeah,
saying is that typically the Republicans would never win again.
yeah, pretty much. And that's there are lots of studies in America that shows that having these people having these sorts of things happen, like these laws, if they got rid of these laws, like, or got rid of the voter suppression, that you're finding that the Democrats would win all the time. Republicans have only won because they cheated. So yeah, that's why I think every country on the planet should have
Allegedly
compulsory.
cheated.
Allegedly, but that's why I
In
think
your
every country on
opinion.
the planet, in my opinion, and multiple political experts' opinion as well. But in my opinion, I I I think all countries should have compulsory voting, because you're not going to see these extreme swings to the right that what you're seeing in America, because hate, unfortunately, is a really big draw card. Yeah.
Well, now we're about to get to the biggest one, and it's also the most recent. Like, this one's breaking
Mhm.
news, which is we now have another state indictment. So New York and Georgia. New York was the first one. The Georgia's the last one, the one that just came out the most recently. He got indicted on RICO charges. Do you know what
What's
RICO charges are?
No.
Okay, so RICO charges. RICO was a set of federal laws that were passed regarding criminal organizations. They primarily deal with the mob in 1970 by the federal government, but there are RICO statutes in most states, and Georgia's are among the most broad, meaning they cover the widest variety of crimes.
Okay, I'll just quickly pop in. Singham says apparently the turnout for the marriage law plebiscite was 79.52. Thank you for that, Singham.
That was talking, I think, about in India
For India or for Australia?
or
Because
for
I
Australia. It might be for
yeah,
Australia.
yeah.
So
So
coming back to the thing, so we're talking about Georgia's RICO. It's used really aggressively. Specifically, what it deals with is it deals with patterns. So racketeering, for those who don't know, is typically used to charge heads or organizers in criminal organizations. It specifically refers to when you are committing a crime that involves sometimes money, but also a threat.
okay, I thought it was like illegally importing tennis rackets.
So typically, racketeering requires some kind of coercion. So when you're using RICO laws, you're talking about a group of people that are committing a crime that involves coercion in some way. So racketeer, influence, and corrupt organizations, actual gangster stuff. And yes, the reason that acronym is the way it is because, again, it's primarily used to prosecute like the mob and gangs and stuff. However, again, in Georgia, RICO is used a lot more broadly. It is the broadest RICO laws in all of the country, and also this indictment is 98 pages, just so you all know. And yes, I did read the whole thing, at least as much as of like legal English as I could comprehend of it.
Yeah. This is why you're the person who does the editing of my videos scripts, because you know how to English.
So there are 161 alleged acts that the indictment states were done in furtherance of a conspiracy to reverse Trump's electoral loss. Now, what's interesting about this indictment is it's a state charging him. So primarily, the only counts he can be charged with as racketeering counts in Georgia are the ones that occurred in Georgia or dealt specifically with Georgia entities and people. So, for example, the alleged phone call that was recorded to the Georgia state election commissioner, in which he said, "Hey, find me 11,000 votes," that could be charged in furtherance of this. However, they can cite other acts outside of it if they can show that they are part of this broader conspiracy to defraud the election that's being charged. And those are what are called overt acts. So the overt acts may have occurred outside of the conspiracy, and they don't have to be crimes on their own, or they occurred outside the state potentially, but they're anything that is done for the purpose of advancing the goals of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
So they actually cited tweets as examples of overt acts.
Yeah.
One of
Was that
them was, one of them
del
was,
so sorry, there's a delay, everyone. So I was about to say, was that one of the ones that you mentioned earlier, the deleted ones where he tweeted, a classified map?
not
Is it that
that
one?
one, no. This one is on January 6th. He tweeted, "If Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to decertify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by their state legislatures, which it must be. Mike can send it back."
Mm.
So he tweeted that out on January 6th, which, that kind of links back to the thing we just talked about the fraudulent elector slates, which come up, by the way, in this indictment as well.
Yeah.
But those are cited as overt acts in furtherance of the conspiracy that he is being accused of in this particular indictment.
What about what's her name? Bobert and you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene as well. Are they also cited in this as well, or is this a completely different thing? Because I think those two
I
probably
don't
should be sent to
recall
prison too.
if Marjorie Taylor Greene was cited, but there are 19 defendants that are actually charged in Georgia, including Rudy Giuliani. Which, if you know anything about him, he was kind of like the president's fixer for a while.
And also Zernike said, funny aside, Rudy was a champion of using RICO to go after people. So I love it when things come around and bite people in the ass, because also Trump made the those laws.
Oh yeah, he went after a bunch of mafiosos like in the 80s.
Yeah. But Trump also made the anti-sedition law or something like that. The Espionage Act. That's right. He put the Espionage Act, and now he's being charged under it.
So what's interesting is that in terms of like the RICO stuff, they also cited, there's a CNN article, 27 lies that he stated in furtherance of this. Some of which the prosecutors demonstrate, in my opinion, pretty conclusively, Trump very much knew he was lying.
Yeah.
Particularly the election, like the lie that he had won the election. Like, he even said in a recorded conversation, allegedly something along the lines of like, this guy sounds like he's crazy, and then went and set him off, one of his lawyers, to Fox News to go do an interview saying that the election was rigged.
Yeah. It's kind of scary how often and how willingly he lies. Like it's so hard to wrap your head around it. And I'm going to speculate. This is a pure speculation. This is not me, because I don't have a psychology degree as well. I'm just pure speculation. But I actually think this is part of his antisocial personality disorder. I think he's got that because one of the symptoms of antisocial personality disorder is that they actually have a harder time telling the truth than lying. Like, it is easier for them to lie than tell the truth. That's part of their condition, apparently. And Ali can probably disagree with me on that one, and go to her. She knows more about it than I do. But that's one of the things that people who have antisocial personality disorder has, is that it is easier for them to lie than to tell the truth. And
or at the I would say at the very least, from what I've read in studies, because there's woefully few studies done on ASPD that are not involving prison inmates.
Yeah.
because that's primarily where they get like people that end up as mass murderers. But like people with ASPD can end up as like surgeons and live normal lives. So
Yeah.
like consider that. I actually have a friend who's diagnosed with it. And it's not that it's easier for them to lie than to tell the truth. It's just way easier for them to lie and there'd be no indication whatsoever on their faces. They feel no guilt about it typically,
Yeah.
unless you're
Yeah.
one of the people they have an attachment to.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just one of those things that yeah, because I read a book about it, and it was a very interesting book. I can't remember what it was called though. And it was they mentioned that in this book that he people who with ASPD have a harder time telling the truth, and Trump would lie about just things that didn't even need to be lied about, like the temperature of the weather or something like that, little things like that, which indicates to me that he probably has at least a type of ASPD. That's my conjecture. As I said, I do not have a psychology degree. I do not have anything like that. So I don't claim to be, but I just know from my personal experiences with a family member with borderline personality disorder and diagnosed narcissism, that they I see a lot of that person in Donald Trump. Personally,
Well, I
that's
mean,
my
and it's
experience.
also important to note that it's you need to be a trained psychologist to tell the difference between a narcissist, somebody with ASPD, and somebody with borderline. They can be very hard to tell apart, at
Yeah,
least outwardly, like in terms of behavior, if you're living with them and you're close to it. So,
yeah,
like, let's not speculate on the mental health of folks too much further. However, I
no,
did find a list, folks who were asking. Okay, there were 19 people that were charged in the Georgia indictment. I found the list of all of them. So, uh, Donald Trump himself, of course, has 13 charges. There's a count of violation of the Georgia Racketeer, so it influenced corrupt organizations act, so that's the RICO statute. Solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer. There's 3 counts there. That's the reference to the phone call that I had mentioned, among a couple of other alleged incidents where he had asked people to try to overturn things like on a state level. Conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer. That has to do with the electors' slates. Conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree. Again, the faked elector slates. There's 2 counts there. Conspiracy to commit false statements and writings. Elector slate. Again, 2 counts there. Conspiracy to commit filing false documents. Again, filing false documents. Self explanatory. And false statements and writings. 2 counts. So then we have Mark Meadows, who was the White House chief of staff during Trump's reign in office. Rudy Giuliani, who was his fixer and lawyer. He's got all 13 counts that Trump does. John Eastman, he's got 9 charges. Jeffrey Clark, who is a top Justice Department official. Sidney Powell, who was a campaign lawyer.
the
Janet
Kraken.
Ellis, another Trump campaign lawyer. Mike Roman, he was a campaign official. Ray Smith, who was a campaign attorney. Kenneth Chesebro, who was a pro-Trump lawyer. He specifically was the architect of the campaign's plot to put forward the false slates of Trump electors. So he's the one who engineered that allegedly. Trevion Kuti, who is I might be mispronouncing that, but they were a publicist who was tied to election worker intimidation. Because remember, the poll watchers that they sent, that like Trump encouraged people, go watch the polls, bring your guns, that kind of thing.
That's
Harrison Floyd, who is
horrifying.
the leader of Black Voices for Trump. According to the court filings, he allegedly arranged a meeting between Fulton County election worker Ruby Freeman and Trevion Kuti, which we just went over. During the meeting, which was videotaped by police, Kuti allegedly pressured and threatened Freeman during the meeting, citing baseless claims that she was involved in voter fraud.
Mm.
So that person for arranging the meetings has 3 charges. Robert Cheeley, who is a pro-Trump lawyer. He participated in the public hearings before Georgia state lawmakers where he and Trump tried to push the fraud claims when he was trying to sue all those states. Stephen Lee, who is a pastor who is also tied to the election worker intimidation. Here, I will link the list. This is from CNN. So this is what I'm referencing to get this information. David Schaefer, Georgia GOP chair and one of the fake electors on the elector slate for Georgia. Sean Still, who was also another fake GOP electors. There were 16 of them. And then we have voting system breachers. So this is another interesting charge on there. They were apparently tied to a breach in Coffee County of like the voting systems. They didn't change anything in them, but they released information on how they worked to the public. So he spent hours inside a restricted area of the Coffee County Elections Office when voting systems were breached during January 2021. So this was when a whole bunch of people broke into the county to try and prove, quote unquote, the voter fraud that was going on, that they were being told by their dear leader was going on. Misty Hampton was the Coffee County elections supervisor. She allegedly facilitated the breach. She allegedly gave Trump attorneys a written invitation to access the Georgia voting systems.
Okay.
And then we have Kathy Latham, I believe is the last one, and she was a fake elector who was also tied to the breach. She signed paperwork claiming allegedly illegitimately that Trump had carried the state. She said she wasn't personally involved in the breach.
Okay. Because I do remember seeing something that there was, and it might have been Georgia, a sort of like a mini January 6th in one of the legislation houses, where people actually breached the building after Trump got through, like lost the election, and like it was like a month or so before January 6th. But this is just me going off memory. I can't tell you much more.
Well, I mean, there was a hearing that was held to try to discredit the election results, and there were also people who breached one of the that's the Coffee County thing we were just talking about. They breached one of the voting areas, and like during the election, the voting counts.
Yeah.
By the way, there are 30 unindicted co-conspirators that were also mentioned in this Georgia indictment.
Jeez.
So there are 30 people that are referenced in it, but they aren't charged. So these are just the 19 people they have enough info on to charge.
And those other 30 people could end up being charged as well?
Potentially. Like they're listed as potential co-conspirators, which means either they've cut plea deals, some of them may be like witnesses, some of them there might just not be enough evidence to potentially charge them. It might not be worth trying to charge them. But like it looks like that's potentially 49 people. Just involved in the Georgia related stuff.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane.
So that's a total, for those who are counting, that's 91 charges across all 4 of those indictments between New York, the 2 federal indictments, and Georgia.
Yeah, so that's one of the big questions that I was going to ask. I've forgotten. So pretend I never said that sentence.
Well, we were just referencing how many counts he's going to be facing. I mean, like just the Georgia stuff alone, he could be potentially facing up to 20 years in prison.
That's a beautiful sentence.
I mean, he's so old, he probably wouldn't make it through all 20 of those years.
He could probably die in prison.
I mean, remember, he does allegedly believe, and this is something he did an interview on forever ago, but he does allegedly believe that like exercise and moving too much decreases your lifespan. He's one of those.
Right. He's wrong. Just letting you know that's wrong. But
anybody who's hung out on my Discord server knows that I believe that he's wrong, because like there's an exercise challenge, and I used to post there pretty regularly before the car accident happened.
Yeah. Steve the Wizard says we're looking at approximately 1,000 years in prison if all the charges stick. That'd be awesome.
Potentially. However, there is like Legal Eagle did a really good video on this. There's a problem, which is that on federal stuff, suggested like sentencing guidelines are complicated and you're not required as a judge to follow them. So
Mm,
that said, the judge presiding over one of the cases is pretty well known for like coming down hard on January 6th people and going beyond the sentencing guidelines. So fingers crossed there.
yeah. And this is one of the things that really makes me quite sad, is that he did this knowing it was going to end up,
Allegedly.
allegedly. He allegedly knew this was all like, and so people legitimately threw away their lives. Both,
Akeda, yes. We got a $5 super chat. Didn't he campaign for the death of the Central Park Five who turned out to be innocent? Yes, yes, he
yeah,
did.
yeah.
Very famous for that at the time.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I just find it's sad. I find like I don't care that he's done that to himself. Honestly, it's his what he did it to himself, but he's dragging so many people down with him, and I find that really sad. My compassion for my fellow human beings extends to those people because, like, if he was just accepted that he lost, in January 6th, somebody did ask in the chat, on the day, I think 5 people died, and I think another 2 people died afterwards, and then you've got people who've been sent to prison for decades. People's lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods, those sorts of things, because this guy was just a megalomaniac. And
Well, I mean,
uh,
he put Mike Pence directly at risk with his comments.
yeah,
Like, this is something that happened on national television also. Like, he directly commented that Mike Pence sealed his fate, something along those lines, at the
mm,
time. And that I don't even know what to say to that. Like the gross level of irresponsibility towards somebody who had served as such a staunch ally to him,
yeah.
just because he
Hello,
wouldn't break
giant
the law for
butthole.
him.
Yeah, exactly. Giant butthole has entered the chat, which is Titan. um,
Yeah, he's literally trying to delay the federal trial until after he could pardon himself too.
yeah,
Even though the
um,
prosecutors are like, no, we need a speedy trial.
yeah. And the thing is, and my fear is that he is going to, like, my fear either way, if he goes to prison, bad things are going to happen, and if he doesn't go to prison, that's massive miscarriage of justice. Um, so either way, like, if he go, like, doesn't matter what happens, it's going to be a bad situation for everyone involved, which is the entire
Well, I mean,
planet.
he also like reignited that in even post World War II, the fascism blueprint still seems to work.
Yeah.
And that's really that's really kind of everybody talks about. And I know that, the comparisons to World War II, whatever. I mean, Trump has literally dog whistled Hitler quotes. Okay. Like
Yeah.
the comparisons are apt at this point. And when you're talking about the rise to power, people think, well, that couldn't happen in a modern society. We just watched that more or less happen. Just because they didn't succeed in holding
Mm,
power afterwards doesn't mean he didn't try. It doesn't mean that
yeah.
he wasn't elected off the back of the same kind of racist ideals.
Yeah. And also, in saying that, even though he didn't succeed, he's weakened the safeguards that we've got against the rise of fascism. So if it's not him, it's going to be someone else. And like, in Italy, the fascist party was elected. In I think in Germany, the fascist party almost got elected or something like that. When I'm saying that this is impacting the world, I'm not joking. there are fascist
I mean, Brexit
movements.
was directly influenced by Trump and all that. They used Trumpist rhetoric, and actually the US sort of stepping in to be like, "Hey, so since you stepped out of Europe, can you just like lower your regulations a bit so we can slip in some of our significantly lower quality produce and meat and other things?" Like they got some significantly unfavorable trade deals with the US.
Yeah.
They ran on very similar platforms.
Yep. Happened in Australia as well, as I said, with Clive Palmer. There's also a growing group of people called the Australian Christian Lobby, which is growing in power because of what's happening over in America. So when I'm saying that Trump being elected by America was dangerous for the world, I'm not joking.
You're not being
Bolsonaro,
hyperbolic either.
no. Um, does anybody have links for stuff explained orange man dogs whistles by chance? I can't. Give me a moment. I'll
You
see if I
cited
can.
that podcast. If you Google Trump, like Donald Trump dog whistles, you can get pretty comprehensive articles that were written all throughout his candidacy explaining some of the dog whistles that he set off.
Skeptic. Oh,
Yeah, and I mean that's an interesting point. I haven't seen this in the news, so I can't verify it. But according to Titan, he publicly asked all other Republicans to drop out because he knows if even one of them is nominated and wins, they won't pardon him. Because yeah, they're all throwing him under the bus. In fact, some of them are actually running against him on the grounds of, hey, he just got federally indicted and state indicted for a whole bunch of crimes. Do you really want to vote a criminal into office? Because tough on crime is the Republican platform. So like you're seeing this massive waves of cognitive dissonance among like Republicans because they're supposed to be the anti-crime party and like the tough justice party TM, and yet they've got this person who might be a criminal, and that's why so many of them have this cult-like mentality that it can't possibly be true.
yeah. So it's yeah. So I linked that in the chat. The podcast where I said that Stand Back and Stand By was a white supremacist prison hate group dog whistle thing. I don't know where she
Well, and I
says
mean, he
that.
didn't
I'm gonna
even
have to watch the
just
whole thing.
well, I mean, he didn't even just dog whistle either. Like he just straight up said, Mexico's not sending their best. He said all
Mhm.
kinds of racist shit. Like he said the quiet part out loud, and
Yeah.
then he won.
Yeah.
Granted by quote unquote allegedly cheating. He
Mhm.
like won the first election through gerrymandering and populism.
Yeah.
The
It's
electoral college, not the popular vote. He should not have won.
nope.
Hillary won that election by the popular
Yeah.
vote.
By a few million votes. Like
But by
that's
our completely like backwards system, Trump had office legitimately in 2020.
yeah. And this is something I want to talk a little bit about in Australian politics
Or up
because
until 2020 rather.
um so what happens in Australia politics is that we've got something called rank vote choice something choice bank some
Ranked choice voting.
that's the word. Sorry, my brain just decided to have a glitch. So basically what that is let's say you want Aaliyah Kai, myself, and I don't know, Legal Eagle. We're all trying to become president of the US. Of course, you'll all vote for me because I'm the best. but some of you might be
But I
like,
mean, like,
no,
let's say you have this pretty wild wackadoo policy, like in stating that, as a government policy, that Australia is in fact a country that exists.
oh no, I'm going to vote. I'm going to go like no, that's terrible. Why would you suggest that? Anyway, but basically what I'm trying, some of you be like, oh yeah, let's vote for Navadia, she's pretty cool, and other people are like, oh, she's all right, but I prefer Ali. And then everyone's like, oh no, Legal Eagle's pretty cool, but I kind of like him a bit more than Ali, and then Navadia is a dickhead. So but if everybody voted for 51% first past post, 51% of people voted for me because, as we all know, I'm amazing. I would win, even though 49% of people didn't want me in. But with ranked choice voting, if you're
If there
like,
wasn't a
okay,
clear majority, then the next candidate, it would go to the next candidate that you had ranked.
yeah. And so basically what that means is that even though like I vote Greens in Australia, I vote Greens, and then I vote Labor, and then I vote everything else more or less, and then I vote the Liberal Party. Um, depending, I'll always put um, I'll always put One Nation last and stuff like that. So, but the Greens never make it in. However, my vote is not wasted, because what happens is that they'll the Greens will go, all right, well, we won this many. How about we negotiate with the Liberals and all the others and the Labor, and then we'll work with you. And if you have the policies that we agree with, we're going to go and give you the votes that what we got. And so what happens is like green will get it in, we'll make it in to Parliament. And so the voice that I have of, yes, the Greens, I want the Greens to get in, they can still make it in and then influence policy with Labor in power. So that's a really good way of doing it. And so like with the US, 30% of people voted for Trump, which means that 60% of people didn't, and yet Trump still won. And then all of the policies have no reason to like they have no influence on those policies that are put through.
But actually,
Um,
like a example of an election in which ranked choice voting would have potentially made a huge difference actually was the runoffs for the candidates being selected for the Democratic election. Like
mm,
there were a lot of Bernie busters who wrote in Bernie on the election for, Donald Trump in 2016.
mm,
Like when Donald Trump and Hillary were running off against each other. And a lot of people didn't want to vote for Hillary because of the massive misinformation campaign against her.
yeah,
And so those Bernie busters, thousands of people threw away their votes by writing in Bernie as a write-in candidate, believing that he could have gotten the majority. Versus if there were ranked choice voting, he might have had a higher chance of getting in. But if he hadn't, most Bernie candidates, like most people who would have voted for Bernie, could have put Hillary in as a second. And
yeah,
she still could have potentially, even though she won the popular vote, she still could have potentially won some of those districts where those Bernie busters were,
mm,
and potentially taken the election with ranked choice voting. Or Bernie could have had a much higher chance, because if people weren't afraid they were throwing their vote away, they're far more likely in ranked choice areas to vote for quote unquote third parties, which Bernie was an independent.
yeah. And yeah, so in Australia, that's how we work. In other countries like New Zealand, they actually have all of the separate um, parties um, all work together. So it's rather than the Greens going, here, I'll give you our votes. The Greens will work together with Labor as separate parties. And so I think in New Zealand, you can have like 15, 20. I don't know. I vaguely understand how they work, but they have lots of different parties. And so rather than Labor always getting what they want, and like passing things through, they it could be between like let's say Labor wants to bring in a policy where they chop down every single one of these particular species of native plants. And of course, the Greens are not going to accept that. So the Greens could work with, I don't know, a farmers and fishers party to stop that from happening, and can override Labor's policy. So I think that's a much better way of working, rather than having, again, a two party preferred two-party basis that we have here in Australia. In New Zealand, and I think also in Germany, they have a similar system as well, um, where individual parties vote depending on the legislation coming in. Yeah.
Well, I mean, either tails, like, that still also requires the potential candidates that are running from other spaces to campaign well and people to actually care about local elections. The problem with, mayors and the like is that you run into a lot of people who just don't even show up for local elections, except for interested parties and old people who tend to want to hold on to their money. No offense to
Yeah.
any older folks in the chat. I know there's at least one of them there, but like it is a fact well documented that, like, at least for compared to our generation, a lot of older folks tend to be wealthier. We were one of the first generations that are significantly less wealthy than our parents, and we're graduating into a worse economy.
Yeah.
And typically folks get more conservative because they're trying to hold on to their money as they get older.
Mm.
It's just a typical pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of other ways. Like also what has happened in the US a lot is right wing rhetoric pulls a lot of people. Like, it is easier to get sucked into right wing rhetoric than it is to get sucked into left wing rhetoric. I know that I've become a lot more lefty as I've gotten older, but all you have to do is look at the popularity of someone like AOC versus somebody like MTG. So, unfortunately, she's, hate is quite attractive to a lot of people. I don't know why. I find that compassion for other human beings is better off. But
Compassion requires work. Anger
yeah,
doesn't.
yeah, that's true.
Well, anger is a
Um,
knee-jerk reaction that's instinctive. Compassion requires thought. It
yeah,
requires an empathy. And what's interesting also is I don't even think it's necessarily that hate is easier per se. I think it's easier to comprehend and to blame people or things you can see than it is to comprehend the complex sets of circumstances that lead to a lot of these problems. It's way
yeah,
easier for a populist or a fascist to go, those people are the problem, and you can physically see those people,
yeah,
right? It's a lot easier for them to do that than for you to understand the complex socioeconomic BSery that led to you losing your house.
yeah.
Like, for example, my mortgage just went up a great deal, and so did the like emergency loan we had to take out in order to not have our house burned down.
Mm,
And like the reason that emergency loan went up is because the Federal Reserve raised interest rates on the banks, and it was one of those adjustable rate credit lines. And like we're barely weathering the expense, but
mm,
that, like, the understanding of how that same thing that the Federal Reserve does trickled all the way down to now milk is $4 a gallon in my state.
mm,
When you're having a conversation about why milk is $4 a gallon, if you point and go, well, it's because the immigrants are taking all the jobs, that's way easier for somebody to visualize than
mm,
having to explain how, well, actually, a lot of the grain that gets imported to get put in the feed for the cows, it came from Ukraine, and the Ukraine war is causing these problems. And also, the Federal Reserve just hiked all these rates on banks, which means businesses are getting squeezed, which means they're passing that on to the consumers, et cetera, et cetera. And also, the labor shortages and the Trump era policies that didn't bring enough migrant workers to actually handle things like the harvest, which decreased yields. You start to get into all of these minutiae, and you have to have a great deal of education in a number of different places, or at the very least be very aware of the news in order to comprehend how all those factors led to that $4 gallon milk, versus you've got the
mm.
fascist on the podium going, well, it's actually their fault, whoever
Yeah,
they are,
yeah,
insert whatever like group is being picked on here. And like you can physically see them. You can't physically see the effect the Ukraine war is having on the grain market. Like, you have to research and read about that. It's something you have to it's something you have to comprehend on an intellectual level, and that doesn't have the level of emotional connection that they did it does.
yeah. Yeah, like a perfect example is that the our prime minister is trying to bring in a lot of public housing, and someone at my lavatory club went, "That's authoritarianism. That's fascism. That's communism. Not fascism." No, she
I
said it
find
was
it very funny that
authoritarianism and communism.
the old men in the chat are competing over who's the oldest. 'Cause
Is this a is this a dick measuring competition? Except for dicks, we're talking about like circles around the sun.
how many tree rings do we have? Who has the most tree rings? We got a super chat from Makeda. I'm probably the oldest here, and you can't say that I want to hold on to my money. That is true. This is a fact. No truer of a fact has been spoken on this channel.
I remember, Akeda, you made Lilith eat me because of to raise money for people in Ukraine. It was your fault that I was attached to a snake for almost 3 hours.
So I've seen Gone Farming post repeatedly about Biden fixing the economy. We're not really talking about the economy in this in this chat. Please try to keep the chat at least a little bit focused on the discussion that's going on, even if it's the jokes and stuff. Like memeing in the chat is fine. Y'all are fine with the who's got the most tree rings competition that's going on there. But like try to keep things focused at least a little bit tangentially on what we're talking about, because we're not really talking about what Trump did to the economy or whether or not Biden can fix it. And again, Biden himself isn't the one at the helm making a lot of these decisions. It's his cabinet that's doing a lot of it. And so, like, when you talk about the complexities of the government, like, the president isn't the one who fixes the economy. It's all the people that are below him that he either appoints or are already there. It's the staffers. There's policy making is complicated. Congress has a role in it too. So, like, let's not just lay responsibility at the feet. Now, granted, Trump did do some major issues to the economy because he did kind of like dunk on all of our allies and also just like kind of push the Republicans to leverage tariffs against countries that ultimately didn't bring any jobs back, really. They just kind of made everything more expensive. But, like, again, if you want us to talk about the economy in a future thing, let us know down in the comments, not in the live chat, not just in the live chat, but let us know down in the comments after the stream is over, and we will consider that for a future episode. Though our next one probably is going to be on fungal networks and forests.
Yes.
Because there's some cool stuff that came up in the Discord server, and Mara was like, I could hear her voice just light up on the other end when I was telling her about some of the cool stuff I'd found out about that. So we're going to be researching that together.
Yes. I haven't yet recorded my smallpox video because it is an 8,000 word long script that has a lot of long words in it. It was very, very complicated. So I'm due to and also Works decided to give me lots of money, lots of work, and also the cat decided to go and have surgery. So I've been very, very busy over the past 2 weeks. But yeah, the smallpox video should be coming out in the next 2
We
to 3
just
weeks.
finished the final edit on the script.
Yep, there's 1 or 2 things I need to double check. And so yeah, there's that.
Don't watch that one if you've got a weak stomach.
Yeah, I'll actually put a you can do, I'm figuring out how to do chapters. So when I go through explaining how
I can walk you through how to do that, like in the description and stuff, like how to get it to divide it. I can walk you through how to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to put a chapter in to say, if you have a weak stomach, please don't watch this bit, because if you watched last fortnight's video on smallpox, I explained a little bit about what happens.
That's an old bridge meme. That's from one of our first episodes, the party in your old bread.
For those the cat.
Yeah, I'm not going to read that quote because Dear Susan would have my nads, but go ahead and read that up on screen if you're watching. Yeah, that's a reference to an old bridge meme, a joke about the party in your old bread. Also, support for the cat.
Yeah, I'll go get the cat. She's right next to me.
All right, and then after that, we'll wrap up because we're actually getting pretty close to the 2-hour mark.
There you go.
Smallpox video is in fact quite large.
You see it. You can see her belly. See how it's got a big striping. She's not happy about it. I know.
All right, so we are actually in the last 10 minutes. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to give?
Allegedly, I think that Trump should allegedly go to prison. Yes, it is. I think it'll be good. I think it'll be good if he does. I'm one of those people who have a really strong sense of justice, and it's sort of like when bad people do bad things, they need to be caught. And I'm actually kind of excited that he's finally going to experience some recompense for his actions. So, do you want to go down? And also, if you have a long-haired cat, make sure you brush her a lot, because if you don't, you'll end up spending $2,000 on a or $3,000 on surgery for said cat, and you don't want to do that.
So for those of you, by the way, that are curious about what's going on the channel, I am in the process of working on my next video. I've been working on it for about 4 weeks. Unfortunately, following the accident, I am still limited on how many hours I can work per day. And I'm also having to take care of some personal life related things having to do, but I don't want to get too much into it, but it's limited the amount of time I have to work a little bit further. And the topic that I'm tackling is extraordinarily complex, so I want to make sure I get it right. I am not absolutely certain I'm going to have a release on Thursday, but I'm almost completely certain I will have a release within 3 weeks. So patrons, I will keep you guys updated. I should let my Discord server know as well whether or not the video that I've been working on will be coming out on Thursday. I'm not completely confident I can finish the script yet, in part because, like I said, the topic is incredibly complex. It's layered, and I want to make sure I get it right because it's actually very, very important for modern pagans. But I know I'm being a little bit vague about it. It's because of the fact that if I decide to do a shorter video or something in the interim, because I might need to delay this one due to just the struggle with making sure that I'm getting all the details right, then I want to make sure that the announcement for the next one isn't going to cause problems. But for those of you who are in the know, for those of you who are patrons, you'll be getting updates on whether or not I'll be getting this out. But I'm thinking that it's most likely going to be coming out in about 3 weeks. So apologies for all those delays, but I can only work about 4 or 5 hours a day, and the level of depth for the particular topic that I'm working on right now, I want to make sure that I'm getting it right. And it is one of those things where there could potentially be afterlife consequences, like for those who believe in afterlives and things, across all of the different afterlife beliefs in ancient Greece. So I want to make sure if I'm putting information out there that I'm getting it both from good scholarship and from primary sources. And so I'm trying to do my best to make sure that I am dotting all of my I's and crossing all of my T's. So apologies for the delays, but I'm trying to ensure that the quality of my work is good. And because of that, it means that things are taking a little longer because I still can only work 4 or 5 hours a day at most. And that's on days that I'm not also doing other things that are related to personal life stuff and house related things.
Yeah. Yeah. In regards to making sure you've got good quality information, the video that I've done, it has from media and scientific papers. How many citations did I have? How many? Something like 15,
500 words worth of citations.
500 words worth of citations. So yeah, so it's important to make sure that you have good quality sources and things like that, which kind of going back, I'm just going to talk about my my last Illuminati video. The video that she did that I responded to, she had like 8 sources or something like that, and 2 of them were related to the topic on hand.
Kata says Trump has more citations. That is a beautiful note to end on.
All right.
All right, so thank you guys all for joining us for another live stream. It's 2 hours long, I know, but I noticed most of you have been here since the very beginning. So thank you guys again for joining us. We are going to be paying attention to, in my Discord server, there's a chat for video discussions. You guys are welcome to continue discussing any of the sources we cited here or any of the topics that we talked about. Give your guys' opinions on the indictments. Like, bring up, like, have a discussion as a community. Like, that's the whole point of that area. And Xenon, like, new folks, there's a link to my Discord in the description. New folks do have access to the video discussion channel, so feel free to chat about that there. Let us know down in the comments if you want us to get into any of the topics that we brought up. Let us know if you're excited for the mushroom forest network, the fungal networks in the forest that we're going to be talking about, because we're going to be doing as much research as we can without getting a PhD in that, because there's some cool stuff. Like I knew about them being a thing, but there were things I learned just from reading a couple of cursory articles that made me like, hey, Marrow, I've got a microbiology topic. Do you want to talk about fungus again? So we're both good. If you guys are looking forward to us nerding out, let us know down in the comments as well. Don't forget to hit the like. Don't forget to hit the like, and make sure that you have your bell turned to all of the things and not just personalized, because YouTube will stop sending out notifications if you have it set to personalized. All right. Yep. Have a good rest of your night, and remember, everybody, happy time zone, and we're stronger together.
Yep. And brush your cat.
Especially if she's had surgery.